Close your eyes, dear listener. Let the noise of the day melt away. Allow each breath to slow, like a soft breeze drifting through ancient ruins. Tonight, we set sail to the Bermuda Triangle, myths, mysteries, and lost souls.
The ocean stretched vast and endless, a sheet of restless glass under the dying sun. To the west, the coast of Florida glowed faintly in twilight. To the south, the Bahamas lay scattered like jewels in the water. And far to the east, Bermuda's lonely speck drifted against the horizon. Between them, a triangle without borders, a sea without mercy.
For centuries, sailors whispered of this place. They told stories of compasses spinning wild, of phantom lights flickering beneath the waves, of ships swallowed whole by calm seas that turned violent in an instant. Some spoke of a curse, others of gateways to another world. The locals had a name for it long before maps gave it form: the Devil's Triangle. And though scholars would one day dismiss the tales as superstition, the sea remembered. The sea never forgot.
The year was 1492. Christopher Columbus stood on the deck of the Santa Maria, the salty air sharp against his face. His fleet had sailed for weeks across the unbroken Atlantic, driven by stubborn faith and the promise of a new world. The men were restless, whispers of mutiny carried on the wind. Every shadow seemed a sign, every wave a warning.
But it was on a night of eerie calm, beneath a moon veiled by drifting clouds, that something truly strange occurred. The lookout called first, his voice strained. "Light! Captain, a light on the horizon!" Columbus narrowed his eyes. There, faint, flickering, as though a torch burned beneath the sea itself. It danced, vanished, and reappeared again. Some swore it was the glow of land. Others whispered of spirits, of the souls of drowned sailors luring them to their doom. The compasses added to the unease, needles twitching, pointing not north, but to some invisible force hidden in the ocean's heart. Columbus recorded the event in his log. Careful, but precise. He was no fool. He knew his men teetered on the edge of fear. But what he wrote was enough to seed the first true account of the Bermuda Triangle's strange lights. That night, sleep eluded the crew. Some prayed, others stared at the dark water, certain they saw shapes moving just below the surface, vast, slow, patient. The new world lay ahead, but behind them they left a legacy of unease, a first glimpse into the Triangle's long and terrible legend.
The centuries after Columbus brought more than explorers and merchants to these waters. They brought whispers. Whispers of ships that should have reached port but never did. Of vessels found adrift, their sails intact, their hulls unbroken, but utterly empty. The Triangle had many such stories, but one echoed louder than most: the tale of the Ellen Austin.
The Ellen Austin was a stout American schooner, her white sails proud against the Atlantic sky. She carried no treasure, just cargo bound for London. But her captain, Baker by name, was a man who trusted the sea. He had crossed these waters many times before. It was in late summer of 1881 when the lookout spotted her. A ship drifting, silent, no flags raised, no crew in sight. She seemed in good order, her masts firm, her hull unscarred. But she sailed like a phantom, carried only by wind and current. Captain Baker ordered a boarding party. The men rowed across with unease, heavy in their bones, each stroke of the oar echoing in the stillness. When they climbed aboard, they found the ship deserted. No blood, no signs of struggle. The crew's personal belongings remained, meals half prepared in the galley, tools lying where they had been left. It was as though the sailors had simply walked off the deck and vanished into the sea. The men called it cursed. Baker, stubborn and practical, refused such superstition. He ordered the vessel crewed by his own men so she could sail in convoy with the Ellen Austin. For a time, both ships cut through the waves together, but then came the fog. A gray wall of mist rose from the sea, swallowing light and sound alike. When the fog finally lifted, the ghost ship was gone. Hours later, she reappeared, but again, empty. The relief crew Baker had placed aboard her had vanished without trace. Some accounts say Baker tried again, manning her with yet more sailors. Some say she disappeared for good, lost into the triangle's heart. The truth remains uncertain, but the legend of the Ellen Austin was born, a tale that sailors passed in hushed tones, of a ship that carried not cargo, but a curse.
A year before the Ellen Austin's strange encounter, another mystery had already struck. The HMS Atalanta, a British training ship with more than 280 souls aboard, left Bermuda bound for England in January of 1880. She was young, strong, and well-built, her decks filled with cadets eager to see the world. She never arrived. Weeks passed, then months. The Atlantic yielded no wreckage, no survivors, no distress calls. For Britain, it was a devastating loss. So many cadets swallowed by the sea in a single voyage. The official report blamed storms, and indeed, the Triangle is no stranger to sudden tempests. But among sailors, another tale spread, that the Atalanta had sailed into a region where compasses spun, where the sky and sea twisted together, where whole ships could be plucked into another world. To some, the Atalanta joined the list of vessels claimed not by chance, but by design, as if the sea itself had chosen them.
By the dawn of the 20th century, the docks of Florida, Bermuda, and Nassau carried a familiar rhythm. Sailors drank, sang, and swapped tales of storms survived and fortunes made. Yet when talk turned to the Triangle, voices always fell quiet. Some swore that in the stillness of night, ghostly sails could be glimpsed on the horizon, vanishing if chased. Others told of phantom crews, men in tattered uniforms calling silently from decks of ships that should have been long lost. The ocean here was alive, they said, alive and hungry. The legends of the Ellen Austin and the Atalanta did more than haunt sailors. They fed the Triangle's growing reputation. To merchants, they were cautionary tales. To mystics, they were proof of a rift between worlds. And to the sea itself, they were only the beginning.
The Triangle had claimed schooners, merchantmen, and training ships. But the dawn of the 20th century brought steel hulls, engines that roared, and vessels thought too mighty for the sea's hunger. The sea proved otherwise. The USS Cyclops, 1918. She was the pride of her class, a massive collier built for the United States Navy, 542 feet long, her steel body cutting through waves with authority. The USS Cyclops carried not only coal and ore, but the confidence of a nation at war. In March of 1918, she departed from Barbados, bound for Baltimore. On board were over 300 men and a cargo of heavy manganese ore. The captain, George Worley, was known to be difficult, stern to the point of cruelty. But the ship was seaworthy, her engines strong.
The last message sent from the Cyclops was unremarkable. All was well. The seas were calm. She never arrived. No wreckage drifted to shore. No distress call was ever received. The Cyclops and her 309 souls vanished utterly into the Atlantic silence. The U.S. Navy searched thousands of miles of sea. Nothing. Not a single scrap of steel or wood was ever found. The official conclusion was simple. She may have been overloaded, her hull strained by the heavy ore. A storm could have capsized her. But sailors who passed through the triangle told another tale, that a vessel of such size could not simply disappear unless the sea itself had swallowed her whole. Whispers spread of a curse. Some said the Cyclops had been pulled into the deep by forces unknown. Others that she sailed still, crewless, a ghost ship of iron and smoke haunting the triangle's fog. President Woodrow Wilson himself would later say, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." It was a truth no investigation could disprove.
2 decades later, the Triangle's hunger returned. The USS Proteus and her sister ship, the USS Nereus, were near identical to the lost Cyclops. Both were colliers, built strong and broad, designed for the brutal work of carrying ore across oceans, and both would vanish in the same waters. In November of 1941, the Proteus sailed from St. Thomas to the East Coast. Weeks later, she was reported missing, all 58 men gone. No SOS, no wreckage. In December, the Nereus followed. Her crew, 61 men, disappeared into silence. Again, no distress signal, no survivors. 3 sister ships, built of the same steel, had all disappeared within the same corner of ocean. The Navy blamed storms, structural weaknesses, or even enemy submarines. Yet records showed no U-boats in the area, and storms had not been reported at the critical times. Among sailors, another explanation took hold, that whatever swallowed the Cyclops had simply reached for her kin.
The Triangle's shadow did not end with wartime. In February of 1963, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a tanker laden with 15,000 tons of molten sulfur, radioed her last report near the Florida Straits. Then, silence. The Coast Guard searched for weeks, finding only a few pieces of debris, life preservers, rafts, but no ship, no crew. Official reports cited safety issues. The tanker's design had been criticized. Sulfur cargo could weaken steel. Yet to those who had heard the Triangle's tales, the ship had simply joined the endless graveyard beneath the waves. Some fishermen swore that in the weeks that followed, the sea glowed faintly yellow at night, as though the sulfur still drifted below, carried on currents that led nowhere. By the mid-20th century, the Bermuda Triangle was no longer just of sailors' superstition. It was a phenomenon with a name, whispered across ports and headlines alike. The disappearances of the Cyclops, the Proteus, the Nereus, and the Marine Sulphur Queen became anchor points in its legend. To skeptics, each could be explained by storms, poor engineering, or human error. But to storytellers and the fearful, these explanations fell short. How could so many mighty ships, each crewed by dozens or hundreds of men, simply vanish without a single distress call?
And more unsettling, why did it always happen here, in this same stretch of sea bounded by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico? The answer remained elusive, but one truth grew certain. The Bermuda Triangle had claimed not only lives, but the imagination of the world.
The sea was not the triangle's only stage. By the mid-20th century, when the world learned to fly, the sky, too, became a hunting ground. And if ships could vanish without a trace, aircraft, light and swift, proved no safer. December 5th, 1945. The war was over, but the U.S. Navy still trained its pilots along the Florida coast. That morning, 5 TBM Avenger bombers lifted from Fort Lauderdale under the command of Lieutenant Charles Taylor. They called it a routine training mission, navigation practice, a simple triangular course over the sea. The men were young, confident, and eager, but by afternoon, their voices crackled with unease over the radio. Quote, "Both my compasses are out," Taylor reported. "We don't know where we are. The ocean looks strange." Other pilots broke in, their transmissions jagged with static. They, too, were lost. The islands below did not match their maps. The sun slipped west, shadows lengthened, and still no bearings could be fixed. Quote, "Everything looks wrong. The ocean doesn't look as it should." Hours passed. Ground stations strained to follow. Signals grew faint. Then, silence. Not one of the 5 Avengers returned. 14 men disappeared as though the sky had swallowed them whole. The Navy launched a massive search, sending out patrols by sea and air. One of those, a rescue plane carrying 13 crew, exploded mid-air and vanished as well, adding yet another mystery to the day's toll. Reports said the explosion was visible from shore, but the wreckage of neither Flight 19 nor the rescue plane was ever found. Official records concluded Taylor may have become disoriented, leading his men farther out to sea until their fuel dry. But among pilots, whispers spread of compasses spinning, of time itself bending within the triangle's grasp. The press seized on the story. Overnight, Flight 19 became the defining legend of the Bermuda Triangle.
3 years later, another plane lifted into the night skies, carrying 31 people aboard. The Star Tiger, a British passenger aircraft, was bound for Bermuda. Weather reports were calm. The crew radioed confidently. ETA 5:03 a.m. All is well. Minutes later, silence. The Star Tiger vanished less than an hour from Bermuda. No SOS, no trace. Search planes combed the waters. Nothing. The sea stretched empty, as though the plane had been plucked from the sky mid-flight. The inquiry blamed headwinds and poor planning, but pilots knew such explanations rang hollow. The Star Tiger was simply gone. Almost exactly 1 year later, the Star Ariel, sister ship to the Star Tiger, lifted off from Bermuda to Kingston, Jamaica. At 9:42 a.m., Captain John McPhee made a calm, routine call. At 9:42 a.m., it was the last anyone ever heard from him. No SOS, no trace, no survivors. The parallels between the two disappearances were haunting. Same airline, same region, same silence. It was as though the triangle had waited a year before reaching again into the skies, erasing aircraft and souls alike without leaving even a shadow on the water.
In December 1948, an American DC-3 with 32 people aboard approached Miami. The weather was calm, the flight routine. At 4:13 a.m., the pilot radioed that he was only 50 miles out. Then, nothing. The DC-3 never arrived. Coast Guard searches scoured the Florida Straits. No wreckage, no bodies. Some investigators suggested electrical failure, others excess weight. But for the families of those lost, such theories were ashes. The DC-3 had simply vanished into air so clear you could see for miles. Others followed. Planes that dropped from radar, pilots who radioed confusion before silence. In 1954, a Navy superconstellation with 42 men aboard disappeared without a trace. Smaller aircraft were lost by the dozens, many never reported in newspapers, but their absence felt deeply by coastal families. And always, the story was the same. Clear skies, calm reports, then sudden silence. By the 1950s, the Bermuda Triangle was no longer a rumor whispered on docks. It was a global story. Newspapers ran headlines of the Devil's Triangle. Writers spoke of compasses spinning, of magnetic lines that bent navigation, of time itself folding mid-air. Pilots passing through swore of strange cloud walls rising from nowhere, of static storms that silenced radios, of moments when instruments spun without reason. Some claimed they emerged minutes or even hours farther in time than they should have been. Official reports cited weather, fuel, and human error, but those who flew through at night, staring down at the dark sea, carried the truth in their bones. There was something unnatural in the skies above the Bermuda Triangle.
By the mid-20th century, the Bermuda Triangle had become more than a series of tragedies. It was a riddle, one that drew scholars, mystics, and storytellers alike. If the sea swallowed ships, if the skies erased squadrons, then the world demanded an answer. The triangle provided many, but none complete. Some looked not at the sky, but beneath the waves. They spoke of Atlantis, the fabled city described by Plato, a civilization advanced beyond comprehension, swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago. Could the Bermuda Triangle be its grave? In the 1960s, reports surfaced of divers off the coast of Bimini who claimed to have found strange stone blocks beneath the waves, the so-called Bimini Road. To some, it was natural limestone. To others, it was a remnant of an ancient roadway leading into a lost city. Whispers grew of crystal pyramids buried deep in the seabed, still humming with energy. These mythical machines, it was said, could twist magnetic fields, confuse compasses, and even bend time itself. Sailors told tales of lights flashing beneath the water, of instruments flickering as if some ancient power still pulsed from the ocean floor. If Atlantis had truly fallen here, perhaps its heart still beat. Others imagined the triangle as more than a place. They saw it as a gateway. Stories emerged of pilots entering vast, glowing clouds only to emerge hours later, far from their expected routes. Some reported seeing swirling tunnels of light within the sky, as though the heavens themselves opened corridors. One pilot, Bruce Jernon, swore in 1970 that he had flown through such a tunnel. He described time slipping strangely, his plane arriving in Miami far sooner than possible. He believed he had passed through a time storm, a vortex hidden within the triangle. To many, this explained why ships and planes vanished without distress. They had not sunk, they had slipped into another time, another world, a dimension beyond the reach of searchers. Some whispered they were still sailing and flying, trapped in another age,
forever circling within the triangle's unseen corridors.
Scientists sought less mystical answers. One theory pointed to methane hydrates, vast frozen pockets of gas locked within the seabed. If disturbed, they could erupt violently, releasing bubbles that turned seawater to froth. Ships caught above would lose buoyancy instantly, sinking as though dragged by unseen hands. Flames might ignite the gas, explaining reports of fire or sudden explosions. To skeptics, this was the answer. The triangle was dangerous not for spirits or Atlantis, but for natural forces lurking beneath. Yet even this did not explain the vanishing aircraft, nor why so little wreckage was found. Others turned to the compasses themselves. The Bermuda Triangle, they noted, was one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north aligned. Navigators who trusted their instruments without correction might veer hundreds of miles off course. Coupled with the region's violent weather and strong Gulf Stream currents, ships and planes lost here could be swept far away before any searchers could find them. It was a logical theory, but those who stared into the triangle's storms at night knew logic was not enough. Among locals, another explanation lingered. The sea itself was haunted. They spoke of the souls of enslaved Africans thrown overboard in the Middle Passage. Their cries carried on the wind. Of ancient Taino spirits angered by the violence brought to their islands. To them, the triangle was not random at all. It was justice. A wound in the ocean's heart, forever hungering for those who dared to cross. Fishermen swore that on moonless nights, voices drifted over the waves, that figures could be seen walking on water, vanishing if approached, that wrecks seen by day would dissolve into mist by dusk. By the end of the 20th century, the Bermuda Triangle was both myth and science, curse and calculation. For every historian who dismissed it as coincidence, there was a sailor who swore he had seen lights in the water. For every scientist who cited storms and currents, there was a pilot who recalled compasses spinning wild, radios silenced by static, clouds that seemed alive. The triangle had no single answer. Perhaps that was its greatest power. It was not the theories themselves that gave it life. It was the mystery. And so long as the ocean stretched dark and endless, so long as men dared to sail and fly across its waters, the Bermuda Triangle would remain a riddle carved into the heart of the sea. The Bermuda Triangle was never marked on maps. No buoys declared its borders. No lighthouses warned sailors of its reach. And yet, by the close of the 20th century, it had become one of the most famous places on Earth, a region of ocean more feared than any mountain or desert.
Oceanographers and meteorologists argued that the triangle's legends were built on fragile foundations. They pointed out that the Caribbean and North Atlantic were among the busiest shipping lanes in the world. With thousands of vessels passing through every year, some losses were inevitable. The region's sudden squalls, violent storms, and the powerful Gulf Stream made navigation treacherous. Wreckage vanished quickly, swept far out to sea. Statisticians insisted that the rate of disappearance here was no greater than in any other heavily traveled region of ocean. Books and articles, they said, had exaggerated, cherry-picking tragedies to build a legend. To science, the Bermuda Triangle was not cursed, it was coincidence. And yet, the stories remained. For every skeptic's report, there was a survivor who told of compasses spinning without reason. For every rational explanation, there was a silence on the radio that no weather report could justify.
The triangle endured in the human imagination because it was more than storms and statistics. It was a mirror reflecting our oldest fears of being lost, of the sea's hunger, of forces beyond our understanding. Night falls differently in the Bermuda Triangle. The stars blur as clouds gather, and the horizon seems to dissolve. Waves roll endlessly, carrying with them the memory of every ship and plane that vanished into their depths. Somewhere, perhaps the Avenger bombers of Flight 19 still circle above black waters. Somewhere, the Star Tiger still cuts through clear skies, passengers unaware their voices will never be heard again. And deep below, ruins shift in the sand. Whether natural or carved, no one can say, while strange lights flicker in silence. The truth of the Bermuda Triangle may never be known. Perhaps it is nothing more than storms and human error multiplied by myth. Perhaps it hides forces we cannot yet name, ancient powers, unseen vortexes, wounds in the fabric of the world. What matters is not which answer is correct, but that the question endures. Because as long as ships sail and planes fly, as long as we peer into the horizon and wonder what waits beyond, the Bermuda Triangle will remain. Not just a place on the map, but a story. A story that belongs to the sea.